about it in the same language.
Yeah. No, lovely to have you on. Both you've been wonderful. Guy Williams, Alexia Russell, thank you very much for your time. I'm Wallace Chapman. Karen Hayes tomorrow. Stay tuned. Lisa Owen with Checkpoint up next. Bye.
Whakarongo mai koe ki te reo irirangi o Aotearoa. This is Checkpoint on RNZ National. I'm Lisa Owen. Haere aki nei, 94. It's a record no one wants to own, the highest number of COVID cases in a single day. And with it a quinella of cancellations, Delta puts the skids on crowds at Addington Cup week for the first time in more than a century, even though the South is COVID-free. It's a curtain call for Auckland's Basement Theatre for the rest of the year at least. Minister Peeni Henare slams some DHBs and a lack of senior leadership for failing Māori in the vaccine rollout. Meanwhile, Vaxivans lead a more nimble approach to getting people immunised. And All Black Cody Taylor chokes back tears in Washington DC as he pays tribute to his teammate, Sean Wainui.
RNZ News at 5 o'clock. Ngā mihi o te rā. Good afternoon. Ko Sarah Bradley tēnei. New Zealand has recorded its highest ever number of daily cases in the pandemic, 94 people with the virus in the community. And the Prime Minister, Jacinda Ardern, is urging people under the age of 39 to get vaccinated, as the largest group in today's cases comes from across the three age ranges of the least vaccinated. She says everyone who can should get vaccinated.
If you are young, you are sadly not invincible. 12 of our current hospitalisations are under 39 years of age. We all have a part to play.
Jacinda Ardern says just over 158,000 people in Auckland have not yet had a first dose, and it's within this group the virus has the potential to spread. 84 cases of COVID-19 are currently being allowed to isolate at home in Auckland. They are spread over 55 households. The Director General of Health, Ashley Bloomfield, says it's an interim measure before finalising the move, which will involve primary healthcare providers.
The planning for this approach has been underway for some time and is a key part of managing COVID-19 in the future. And this is a key objective of our ongoing approach across the health system to better manage COVID-19 cases in the community safely.
Ashley Bloomfield says criteria for isolating at home include both a public health and clinical risk assessment and if a person can isolate safely away from others in the household. Pregnant women are being assured getting a COVID-19 vaccine is safe and is highly recommended. There are 5 recorded cases of pregnant women with the virus being hospitalised as part of the current outbreak. Dr. Ashley Bloomfield says there is clear evidence globally and in this country that vaccination is not just safe, but is also highly protective for pregnant women.
There are no additional safety concerns in pregnancy. Vaccination at any time in pregnancy helps, and so I'd encourage anyone who is pregnant to talk to their health professional about getting vaccinated if you haven't already.
The government says it rejected a business case for a Maori vaccine rollout back in February because of supply constraints. The Whānau Ora Commissioning Agency says if its plan was approved, vaccination rates for Māori would be far higher than the current 45%. But the Associate Health Minister, Peeni Henare, says when the plan was submitted, the country's vaccine supply was constrained. He says there were also infrastructure issues.
Māori health providers were clear for the first half of this year that they didn't have the infrastructure to be able to deliver on the kind of scale that we required them to, which is why we did the sequence plan like we did. So no, I don't agree with that.
Peeni Henare says those issues have now been resolved. A person on Waiheke Island has tested positive for COVID-19, the first case on the island during the Delta outbreak. The local board chairperson, Kath Handley, says officials told her this afternoon that the community is nervously awaiting more information.
Shock, because this is the first case diagnosed on Waiheke, but not one of surprise, because we are all too well aware all of the time of our very close connectedness to Auckland.
Kath Handley says they are waiting to hear if there are any locations of interest. The leader of the National Party says the bipartisan approach to proposed changes to housing density rules is an indication of the seriousness of the housing crisis. National and Labour have worked together on a bill to make it easier to build more houses by amending the Resource Management Act. National's Judith Collins says it is important to put aside politics in an emergency situation.
Announcing this bill together with the government is a vital step to send the signal to councils that New Zealand's two major political parties are committed to working together to roll back the planning red tape. And I want to thank Ministers Woods and Parker for accepting the invitation to work together.
Judith Collins says National offered to work with the government. To sport, and the death of a teammate has hit the All Blacks hard. Maori All Black and Chiefs player Sean Wainui was killed in a car crash yesterday. All Blacks hooker Cody Taylor, who played alongside Wainui at the Crusaders in the early stages of his career, says the Chiefs players in particular are feeling the loss ahead of their test against the US this weekend.
Pretty tough. I know there's a few boys in here really struggling. We sort of touched on it this morning as a group, and there'll be another opportunity to do that later on. You know, with a man with so much money and respect, I think it's such sad news to hear, and it's hard to talk about, mate. And yeah, it's a pretty tough time.
The former Test cricket umpire Fred Goodall has died. He was 83. Goodall was New Zealand's leading umpire during the 1970s and 80s. He's remembered for being elbowed by West Indies bowler Colin Croft during the second Test against New Zealand in Christchurch in 1980, after the tourists became incensed by Goodall's officiating. And unvaccinated tennis players are unlikely to get a visa to travel to Australia and play in January's Australian Open in Melbourne. Victoria Premier Daniel Andrews says the only way unvaccinated players would be admitted is if they went through quarantine, a major sticking point for some players. Men's champion Novak Djokovic is refusing to reveal his vaccination status, saying he's unsure if he'll defend his title. And that's the news.
An epidemiologist goes wild for vaccines.
Hate lockdowns? Get a mate jabbed. Really hate lockdowns? Get two mates jabbed. There's people out there who haven't been vaccinated, who trust someone who is vaccinated.
The Prime Minister backs vaccine incentives.
We have said up and down the country to providers, you do what works, we'll back you. You know your community, do what works.
And how about a $10 million jackpot?
Put me in the draw for that $10 million, though, and I'll go back and get a third jab.
You can bet on us. Morning Report, weekdays from 6 on RNZ National.
And we're funded through New Zealand On Air. Now it's time for the short forecast from Met Service to midnight tomorrow. For Northland, Auckland and Coromandel, mainly fine. Isolated afternoon showers for Coromandel tomorrow night. Waikato to Kapiti, including the Central High Country. Cloudy periods, isolated showers at times. Bay of Plenty, Gisborne, Hawke's Bay, Wairarapa and Wellington, also Nelson and Marlborough. Fine today, cloud and isolated showers spreading north from tonight, showers clearing from southern regions tomorrow morning. For Bulla to Fiordland, cloudy with isolated showers, however rain in the south spreading north today, clearing to fine in Fiordland by this evening. Rain clearing about southern Westland and rain easing to showers farther north overnight. For Canterbury, rain spreading north, easing to isolated showers tonight, but remaining rather cloudy. Otago and Southland partly cloudy with a few showers, clearing inland this evening and becoming fine there. Showers clearing elsewhere Wednesday afternoon. And for the Chatham Islands, cloudy with a few showers. This is RNZ National. It's coming up to 8 minutes past 5. I'll have the news headlines at 5:30.
Nā mihi Sarah, tēnā koutou katoa no mai haere mai ki checkpoint I tēnei rā, ko Lisa Owen tēnei. It's a record that there's no medal for. 94 new cases of COVID in the community. 87 of those are in Auckland and 7 in Waikato. It is the highest daily case count the country has recorded since COVID landed in New Zealand. The previous record was 89 in April last year. Another number that is concerning for health officials is 108 1,083. That's the number of unlinked cases in the past 14 days. More than 45% of people infected during the fortnight are Māori. More on that later. And confirmation today, COVID has spread to Waiheke, the first ever case there. Here's our political editor, Jane Patterson.
87 of the cases reported today are in Auckland and 7 in Waikato. The new cases in Waikato are all linked. 38 people are in hospital, with 5 in either ICU or a high dependency unit. The Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern offering some reassurance.
I know the highs and lows of cases. It's incredibly hard on people, particularly those in Tamaki Makaurau. I just wanted to reinforce again that we're not powerless. We do have the ability to help keep cases as low as we can. Now, I spent a bit of time talking about that yesterday, but just a reminder again, the cases that we're seeing in Auckland right now are not confined to one part of Auckland. They are across 124 suburbs.
She says some of the cases have resulted from breaches of the rules.
I can tell you that 39 of our cases today are household or contacts of existing cases. So you'd expect that relative proportion. We do know that some of the cases we have today are from social gatherings. And as I've already said, from some of the analysis that our teams on the ground have done in the past, they've identified that one of the significant contributing factors are those social indoor gatherings.
The Director General of Health, Dr Ashley Bloomfield, also revealed 84 positive cases. Over 55 households are being allowed to self-isolate at home under strict conditions.
Factors such as a person, whether they live in a residence that allows them and their household to isolate safely away from others, ensuring that they have good phone and internet access, that they can use their own transport to safely access a testing centre when testing is required, that they're happy and comfortable to isolate at home.
Dr Bloomfield also said today people 12 years and older who are severely immune compromised will now receive a third primary vaccine dose. He also gave reassurances about the safety of the vaccine for pregnant women, encouraging them to get vaccinated at any stage. Tomorrow, the COVID-19 Response Minister Chris Hipkins will discuss MIQ settings and will give an update on schools.
And we'll be joined by Associate Health Minister Peeni Henare later in the programme. The peak of Canterbury's social calendar has been scrapped this year, with the Addington Cup week closed to the public for the first time in more than a century. It's the latest in a slew of cancellations in the region as the threat of Delta creeps closer to the COVID-free south. Our Otatahi cameraman Nate McKinnon and reporter Kim Moody filed this report.
A glittering racetrack and stands fit for a crowd of 20,000 to fill, but the seats will be without punters this year. For the first time in its 117-year history, the Addington Cup Week will be held behind closed doors. Level 2's restrictions on crowd sizes have forced the hand of the event's organisers 3 weeks out, and the crowd of attendees will be slashed to just 1,200 people across the day, mostly trainers, owners and members. Addington Raceway manager Darren Williams says it's gut-wrenching.
It's very significant for Canterbury, Canterbury being the home of harness racing in New Zealand, and probably Addington Raceway recognised Australasian-wide as the number one venue. This is New Zealand's biggest race day, so it's very frustrating. Cup week in itself, with both the thoroughbreds and the greyhounds and the AMP show and the work that the council do, is massive for the Canterbury region. It's our party time.
Williams says the highlight of Christchurch's social calendar, famed for its fashion, fun and day drinking, wasn't level 2 friendly. And whilst the horse racing hasn't been scrapped, it'll look very different this year, with seated groups across the facility.
The social activity of coming to New Zealand Cup Day with family and friends doesn't lend itself to social distancing. People wanting to party, and we want them to party, so it just become very, very difficult. It means that we will have a small group of people on course, industry participants, owners, some of our own club members and our business partners, but pretty much about 1,200 people instead of about 20,000.
Christchurch's Economic Development Agency estimates Cup and Show Week brings in nearly 4.4 million into the city under normal conditions, as well as more than 22,275 visitor nights. And it's not the races without the front row of fashion attending, but this year that's been shifted online too. Christchurch fashion enthusiast Michael Stanton, who was also a judge at this year's Wellington Cup Day, says it's a massive blow for the city.
I mean, we're pretty disappointed, but I would say that, the government can shut down the races, but they certainly can't shut down the vibe, the weather, the anticipation. Such a fabulous week for Christchurch, it really is. And, so I think if they're not on, disappointing, but it won't stop the party. The party goes on.
And with the races to be screened in pubs and bars across the city, he says it's still a good opportunity to dress up and have a good time with friends in the sun.
Yeah, we quite often go to the races and don't see a horse anyway, so I'm not so that concerned about that. It's about the vibe. It's about bringing people together. That's the most important thing, just the community feel. In Canterbury's, we've been through some hard times, The virus hasn't been here for, over a year? Most of my friends there, all of them are fully vaccinated, so, I don't see any reason to not, party as normal.
On the streets of sunny Ototahi today, people seem to agree that big-scale events shouldn't get the green light right now.
I think events should be definitely something we're focusing on. I just don't necessarily know it needs to be so alcohol orientated. Now, I know the races aren't alcohol orientated for everyone, but it's like Seafest and things like that. That's what it's become. It's become a place for, usually I'd say between like the 18 to 25s, dressing up, pre-drinking at home, and then going and just having a day in the sun, getting absolutely mortal.
I mean, it's disappointing for people that would usually go. Personally, I think that public health is more important, and there will be other events in future, and it's just the reality of the current climate that we're in.
In terms of the organisers, they've got to spend more money on the doors to censor people and to check people that get in, so they're not going to be happy about that. It's a difficult one for large-scale businesses, like the convention centre here. It's super difficult, but I think for smaller scale you can make it work, especially in the South Island.
And if you were listening to that piece from Nate and Kim, we'll put the video up on our Facebook page. Do check it out. Labor and National have put their differences aside to slash red tape around housing density with the aim of making it easier and cheaper to build new homes. New rules will allow up to three-storey buildings on sites in the country's biggest cities without a resource consent. National's leader, Judith Collins, first reached out to the Labor government in January, proposing they work together to mitigate the housing crisis. Our reporter, Annika Smith, has more.
In a rare display of bipartisanship, both Labor and National have joined forces. Both parties have come up with new legislation, amending the Resource Management Act to encourage higher density development across 5 cities to boost the supply of affordable housing. Housing Minister Megan Woods says on such a big issue, it makes sense to work collaboratively.
We need stable, enduring solutions to fix a housing crisis that has been decades in the making.
National's Judith Collins agrees, saying there is now political consensus on tackling a problem that's long been evident.
I have been convinced for a long time now, in fact for many years, that rolling back the council resource consenting rules is the key to addressing many of our housing woes. It is crazy to me that existing planning rules actually make it harder to get houses built.
It's estimated the new rules will allow between 50 and 100,000 new homes to be built in the next 5 to 8 years. The new legislation will also speed up the implementation of the National Policy Statement on Urban Development. This will require councils in Greater Auckland, Hamilton, Tauranga, Wellington and Christchurch to have their intensification policies and rules in place by August 2023, at least a year earlier than the current timeline. As well as presenting a united front, the bipartisan approach should give some certainty to homeowners, developers and investors, with the knowledge a future national government would not roll back the changes. Newtown's Residents Association group has been lobbying for higher density housing, but done moderately, for 30 years. Vice President Martin Hanley says the 3-storey buildings, flagged today, fit this bill.
Fixing the housing problem now is exactly what Newtown is on about. This is a much better initiative than the problematic, out-of-scale 6 to 8-storey buildings turning up next door to little low-rise houses. In scale, it's brilliant.
Not everyone is on the same page, however. Mission Bay Kohimarama Residents Association Chairman Don Stock is concerned the new rules are a one-size-fits-all approach. He's not opposed to housing intensification, just not in all areas.
Different areas have different attributes, and those attributes should be taken into account before wholesale changes are made. If those changes are being made by decree from Wellington, then there seems to be very little opportunity for local communities to have any say in the nature of the development that goes on in their area.
National's Judith Collins made it clear this morning that the problem is bigger than anyone's backyard.
This is not just about us. I mean, one day we will not be politicians, but we are still Kiwis who worry about the fact that we have a country where an entire generation is growing up thinking they can't buy a home, and actually that's not good enough.
The legislation will have its first reading next week and will become law by mid-December, in the last sitting week of the year.
It is almost 5:20. You're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Kia ora ra watu mo te whakarongo mai. E haere aki nei, coming up, the Vaxi vans aimed at a more nimble approach to getting the missing 500,000 their first jab. Homai o whakaro, would love your feedback. Nō reira ānei nā kaupapa mo te hōtaka nei, particularly on the Cup week in Canterbury, so no crowds. What do you reckon? There's no COVID in the South Island at the moment. Should they still be at that level setting and unable to have events like this? Also case numbers, record case numbers today, and housing density. Let us know what's on your mind. Text us on 2101, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, or you can send us an email, checkpoints@rnz.co.nz. An Auckland theatre has drawn the curtains on the 2021 season, saying even level 2 would be too hard to operate in. The Basement Theatre in the central city hosts performances from theatre makers, dancers, visual artists, musicians and comedians. But a lack of certainty around Delta alert levels has led to the constant rescheduling of performances. Executive Director Kat Ruka says the decision to go dark for the rest of the year wasn't easy.
It was a tough decision, but also we feel we're really confident that we've made the right call at this time. We've certainly been sort of centering what the artists feel like they want to do. So although it was tough and it's going to be really sad to not see our communities for the rest of the year, we really feel like it's the right call.
Talk me through that. What was behind the decision and what were the artists telling you?
So the top priority for us was to consider what is best for the health and well-being of the artists at this really tough time. So what we were doing prior to making this call was constantly sort of rescheduling their shows and just sort of waiting on the announcements from the government around that. And that constant kind of reshuffling, just after a while, it really wears thin on artists and also the audiences who have purchased tickets and they're then, getting postponed into other dates. And then also what that means for our staff as well. So constantly producing the shows and then having to unproduce them time and time again is a recipe for burnout. And so we just kind of wanted to resist that style of working and just make a call.
Yeah, because it's pretty stressful, I imagine, and disappointing to pour your heart and soul into a piece of work and you don't know whether it's going to see the light of day or not.
It is. It's really stressful emotionally and mentally. And then it's also a huge financial burden as well to be counting on, some dollars coming through selling your tickets, and then it doesn't eventuate. And so adding all of those kind of aspects up, it piles up and it's just a bit of a recipe for disaster. Yeah.
So, Kat, what does it mean for the shows that you did have planned that aren't going to go ahead this year?
Yeah, so all of those shows will get postponed into 2022. So already next year is looking like, fingers crossed, given that we can all return to the theatres, it's looking like a jam-packed year. And we're going to be coming back pretty strong with lots of amazing shows. So we've been able to postpone everything into 2022.
But as you said, this is tough for artists and performers financially. So what can be done to help them out right now?
So normally we take a bit of a cut from the box office, and we won't be doing that in 2022 for the impacted artists. We also are removing lots of sort of inside charges that happen to ticketing. We are also making sure that our Christmas show artists get paid out, even though they won't be able to do their show, just in recognition of the work that it, requires to plan for these things. And our board are actually also in a kind of gesture of goodwill, putting some money towards those artists that have been impacted also.
So, Kat, looking to 2022 and hopefully happier times where we can all get together and socialise again, what do you actually need to fire back up in terms of alert levels? Where is the start point for you?
Yeah, I think we need really clear guidance and leadership from the Ministry of Culture and Heritage to start showing what those things are going to look like for events in each level setting. So last year it was a lot more clearer, but with Delta things have just become a lot more murky and uncertain. So we're just kind of sitting around waiting for that guidance. So that's the sort of main starting point for us. And then we sort of need those agencies like CNZ to come to the party with some resilience funding as well to make sure all of us arts organisations have a bright future. And so far CNZ have done that, which is really, really great. But I think that there'll be some more opportunities for agencies to come to the party further down the line to just make sure our sustainability is possible in the future.
Kat, do you reckon you can operate at level 2 in a Delta environment? Does that give you enough of an audience?
For basement, just because we're so small, level 2 isn't super financially viable for the artist. And so we were going to operate in level 2, but it was going to be a real push. For the larger venues, potentially that's possible, but we've chosen not to.
So you actually need us to get all the way back down to 1 before you can get down to business again?
Is that a bit too hopeful? Ideally, yeah, we do. We need to get back to level 1 and we need some really clear guidance around what our new level 1's going to look like for the events industries as well, in terms of guidelines and rules around health and safety.
So what kind of lead-in time do you need then? If you're saying 2022 is the new season that you're looking forward to, how much of a lead-in before you can fire up?
We can fire up pretty quickly, actually, because we've got some previous experience going. And like I say, basement's pretty small, so it can be quite agile. So pretty much as soon as the government gives an indication that we're moving toward some kind of level 1, we can fire up in a matter of, a couple of weeks.
And that's Kat Ruka from the Basement Theatre. It is 26 minutes past 5. Kia mau tonu mai. Stay with us. You're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National. As Te Tai Tokerau prepares to move down alert levels, a whangarei doctor is pleading with people to get vaccinated, saying the effects of not doing so will be absolutely devastating. There are still around 45,000 people in Northland who have yet to have a single vaccine. Nationwide, that figure is around 600,000. And with doctors already worried about the pressures they face, many are bracing for the devastation Delta will cause our health system if those vaccination rates don't rise. Anei te kai repoata, Anita Blake-Person.
As Delta bears down on Northland's southern border, health teams in Te Tai Tokerau are urgently trying to boost vaccination rates. Whangarei emergency Dr. Gary Painda says the need is immediate.
What we're seeing is there are groups that are uninterested in vaccination, and there are pockets of deprivation, which we haven't done a good job of reaching out to. So the longer we allow that situation to persist, the more danger the whole country is in.
His major fear is the already struggling health system, which he says isn't coping on an average Saturday.
There are over a dozen patients backed up in the waiting room who were significantly sick and needed to be seen in a timely fashion. These are not patients that are low acuity and can go somewhere else. These are patients who genuinely needed care. Of the patients I saw that day, I admitted all but one.
He says there's a sense of foreboding right now for the roughly 15% of New Zealanders who are unvaccinated.
600,000 unvaccinated adults. That is like dry tinder just waiting for a match. And what I and other emergency doctors and healthcare workers of all kinds worry about is a huge surplus of demand as and when COVID sweeps through.
Long wait times, growing wait lists, delays in treatment and staffing struggles. He says it won't take many COVID cases to bring hospitals to their knees.
There will be a shutdown of the health system. There will be not just weeks, but months of having crippled hospitals that can't take care of people who are coming in with heart attacks and strokes and broken hips. We have to prepare ourselves. There's no reason to think that we will avoid what lots of other countries, virtually every other country, has faced.
Dr. Payenda knows it's grim to hear, but he says we need to start discussing the harsh realities of COVID, like how many New Zealanders would likely die. It's not just the deaths which will devastate. Auckland University immunologist Anna Brooks is studying the effects of long COVID and says the lasting impacts can't be underestimated.
You know, we don't want to be in a position of scaremongering, but it's all about cold, hard facts now. This virus is dangerous. It is not just a mild respiratory infection. This virus can cause absolute havoc in your body, even without you knowing it. And that is what is so frightening about this.
Brooks says it's a nervous time.
What the data is sort of indicating, people who have got long COVID still, 19 months since their infection, they're still very ill. And it could be that, it's 1 in 10 that are in that category, and it might be 1 in 3 that have a shorter duration. We just don't know. We just want everyone to protect themselves against, having to deal with these long-term consequences that we don't know how to treat yet.
The threat is particularly great to Māori communities, with vaccination rates lagging and 560 COVID cases recorded in the Delta outbreak. Today, the Associate Minister of Health, Peeni Henare, said COVID was on the doorstep of many houses.
In the last 2 weeks, Māori have made up 45.7% of total cases versus 28% throughout the entire outbreak. Although sobering, these numbers reinforce why vaccinating our communities is so important.
Peeni Henare today promised further announcements around boosting Māori vaccination rates, but they won't come until later this week.
And that was Nita Blake-Person reporting. Kia ora e te iwi e haere nei I a checkpoint. All Black Cody Taylor pays an emotional tribute to his teammate Sean Wainui, who was killed in a car smash. A serve for those not on board with the vaccine rollout to Maori from Minister Peeni Henare. He joins us live. And battle lines over the border between Te Tai Tukaro and Tamaki Makaurau. Homai o whakaroa, we would love your feedback on anything you've heard on the programme this evening, whatever's on your mind. Text us 2101, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, or you can email us checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. It is time for the headlines now. Ko Sarah anō tēnei.
Kia ora, Lisa. The government is again urging unvaccinated people to get a COVID-19 jab, following confirmation of the highest daily total of new community cases recorded in New Zealand. There were 94 new cases today, 87 of which were in Auckland. The other 7 are in Waikato. The Prime Minister says the highest number of today's cases are from across the 3 age ranges of the least vaccinated. Jacinda Ardern also says that 12 of the 38 people in hospital with the virus are under 39. She says just over 158,000 people in Auckland have not yet had a first dose, and it's within this group the virus has the potential to spread. And a Whangarei emergency doctor says if people don't get vaccinated, the hospital system will be overrun. Roughly 15% of the eligible population across the country has yet to receive one vaccination. Gary Payenda says many hospitals are already struggling to meet demand, and vaccination rates need to rise urgently to prevent a potential collapse of some services. Residents of Waiheke Island are nervously waiting to see if any further COVID-19 infections pop up, following news today of the first positive case during the Delta outbreak. The local board chairperson, Kath Handley, says officials told her this afternoon about the case. She says she was shocked but not surprised that COVID made it to the island, given its closeness to Auckland. And the National Party leader says a bipartisan approach was needed to try and solve the housing crisis. National and Labour have worked together on a bill to make it easier to build more houses by amending the Resource Management Act. There are hopes that up to 100,000 new homes can be built in the next decade. National's Judith Collins says it is important to put aside politics in an emergency situation. The ACT Party's David Seymour, however, says it's no use going through a house-building boom without also providing the necessary infrastructure. Those are the headlines. Our next news and sport update is at 6.
Nā mihi Sarah, no mai hoki mai. This is Checkpoint, ko Lisa Owen tēnei, ko taku hoa I nāianei, ko Anand Zaki, who is in our Christchurch newsroom to bring us our business update. Anand, the Commerce Commission is looking into anti-competitive behaviour. Now, who are the big players involved here?
Kia ora, Lisa. Yes, the competition watchdog says they've been carrying out an investigation looking into anti-competitive behaviour in the electronic retail sector. Now, they're not saying much and aren't naming those involved, but we've been told that they are Harvey Norman and the large multinational LG Electronics. LG says it's fully cooperated with the Commission and they believe the investigation has finished. The company says as far as it's concerned, it hasn't taken part in improper market practices. The investigation is around something called resale price maintenance. Now, what is that, you might ask? Well, according to the Commerce Commission, it's when a supplier enforces or tries to enforce a minimum retail price, which is, of course, anti-competitive and illegal. The penalties are pretty stiff. Individuals can face fines of up to $500,000 and companies can be hit with a $10 million fine or any gains they made from such action. We've also asked Harvey Norman for comment and they are yet to respond. Now, the Commerce Commission have cracked down on resale price maintenance in the past. So in 2006, which is a while ago now, computer parts wholesaler Morningstar was ordered to pay $50,000 plus court costs after it admitted it contacted a number of resellers to persuade them from advertising their products below the prices specified. And in that instance, employees at the company threatened to impose penalties on the retailers who didn't comply with the suggested pricing and offered benefits to those who did. So this current investigation involving LG and Harvey Norman, as we understand it, it'll definitely be interesting to keep an eye on.
And Anand, financial hardship from the lockdown is pushing people to dip into their KiwiSaver, is it?
Yeah, it's been tough going for a lot of people recently. The Disputes Resolution Group Financial Services Complaints says it's seen a 5 to 10% increase in the number of complaints from those who've tried and failed to access money on hardship grounds from their KiwiSaver. It says there's also been a 25 to 40% jump in the number of payouts approved by those KiwiSaver fund managers, which is a real concern because, of course, KiwiSaver is there for people to save for retirement at the end of the day. So Susan Taylor, who's the Chief Executive of Financial Services Complaints, says it's really disheartening because obviously withdrawing money for hardship now will affect their longer-term future and the amount of money they'll have when they do eventually retire. They also say complaints that's received from people are from people who want to access their KiwiSaver to cover personal debts or car loans. And this sort of mirrors what the Financial Markets Authority recently said in its KiwiSaver annual report, which came out last month. And in the year to March, significant hardship withdrawals increased 42% to nearly $160 million. And there were 21,000 hardship withdrawals worth an average of around $7,500, and both those figures are up from the previous year. But they say that overall it's still a low proportion of all withdrawals, with retirement withdrawals and first-time withdrawals taking up the biggest chunk.
And Anand, should we take a quick trot around the markets?
Yes, the NZX Top 50 Index is up 0.5%, 67 points to 13,066. The Kiwi dollar continues to strengthen on the back of yesterday's inflation data, trading at 71.3 US cents, 95.6 Australian and 51.8 British pence.
Thanks, Anand. Ka kite. Anand Zaki there with business. All Black hooker Cody Taylor choked back tears at an emotional All Blacks press conference today as he paid tribute to his teammate Sean Wainui. 25-year-old Wainui, who played for the Māori All Blacks, the Crusaders and more recently the Chiefs, was killed when the car he was driving hit a tree yesterday morning. The All Blacks, many of whom played alongside him, were shocked to learn of his death following their arrival in Washington after a 30-hour journey from the Gold Coast. Felicity Reid was on the emotional Zoom conference call.
Cody Taylor had played alongside Sean Wainui during his time at the Crusaders. In the outside back, it also meant a lot to those who knew him through the Chiefs, Māori All Blacks, Taranaki and the Bay of Plenty. Through tears, he spoke about the impact of his friend's sudden death.
It's pretty tough. I know there's a few boys in here really struggling, as you'd expect, and we sort of touched on it this morning as a group, and there'll be another opportunity to do that later on. But yeah, I just think, with a man with so much money and respect, I think it's such sad news to hear. And yeah, I suppose there's a lot of shock as well. You don't think it's gonna, ever happen to someone, but it does. It's just cruel reality of, I suppose, the world.
Another of Wainui's Crusaders teammates, Sam Whitelock, shared Taylor's sentiments. He says the large touring party are rallying around those who need the support.
Yes, we're here to play rugby, but there's so many other things that can affect that, and this is one of those ones. So people will be going through the different cycles of grief. Obviously, at the moment, it's all very raw still, and everyone's just in their own way connecting with their own stories about Shawnee. For myself at the Crusaders, obviously Whitelock and Wainui used to sit next to each other on the planes and used to love having that little catch up around, where he was and his life is, I think it was 19, 20 when he was at the Crusaders, and so that was my story. But everyone else is connecting with, their memories they have of Shawnee.
25-year-old Wainui was a father to 2 young children, and for All Blacks with children of their own, it is particularly hard to be a long way from home at a time like this. It took about 35 hours for the All Blacks to travel from the Gold Coast to Washington DC, where they'll play the USA Eagles over the weekend. It's the first time since 2016 the All Blacks have played in America, and strict team-imposed COVID-19 protocols mean the squad doesn't have the same freedoms as everyday Americans. For Taylor, who has dealt with the restrictions in New Zealand and Australia, the difference was stark.
Well, I sort of noticed it in the airports once we got into America, just how packed they were. Everything's open. You sort of can see why cases are higher in that over here, but yeah, they're just getting on with life.
The players are waiting clearance to be allowed to play golf in their downtime, but hooker Dane Coles says they're unlikely to get to an NBA or NFL game.
We know what we're getting into, and that's just the way it is, and I don't think you want to risk go a bit of sightseeing to risk your team getting COVID and stuff like that. So look outside the bus when we go to training and see what we can see, and then go to our hotel and spend some quality time with the lads.
The All Blacks play USA before travelling to the UK to take on Wales, Italy, Ireland and France.
And to Australia, where an urgent search for a missing 4-year-old girl feared abducted is being hampered by extreme weather. Cleo Smith went missing from a campsite in a rural area on the coast of Western Australia 4 days ago. She was with her family in a tent in her sleeping bag and was last seen by them at about 1:30 in the morning. It sparked memories of the Azaria Chamberlain case, the 9-week-old baby who disappeared near Uluru more than 40 years ago on a family camping trip taken by a dingo. There's been a massive search, but that was temporarily called off today as heavy rains and winds battered the coast. ABC reporter James Carmody is near the Blowholes campsite in McLeod and joins us now. James, have they been able to get the search up and going again today, given the weather?
They have. Conditions have eased just enough with that torrential rain going away and some of those battering winds easing just enough for the search to resume. So the police mounted division is just coming in, and they'll be searching with their horses in what is some really rugged terrain here. The marine side of the search has more or less wrapped up. Police confident they've done all they can to check the ocean here, but that wide-scale land search will resume, as will the investigative side of this operation.
Can you give us a little bit of context here, James? Who was on this trip? I mean, is it a popular camping site? Were there other people camping by? Who was in the tent at that time of the night?
So it's quite a remote spot on a really rugged patch of coast here, but it's quite a popular camping site especially among people who live in the nearby town of Carnarvon, about an hour south from here. Where we are, we're about a 10 hours drive from Perth, so it is quite remote, but it's quite a well-known camping area. It was a family camping trip with the mother and her partner and their other child, and they've woken in the morning on Saturday and their 4-year-old daughter was missing. Now, police are working on two theories. One, that perhaps Cleo Smith has wandered away from the tent and they're hoping that would mean she may be found somewhere nearby. But the other theory they're looking at is the possibility that someone may have taken this 4-year-old girl.
So they are saying that she was last spotted by her family at 1:30 in the morning. What happened? Did they wake up?
That's right. We believe that was the last time they saw her. And then when they've woken at 6 a.m, she was nowhere to be seen. And that's when they've raised the alarm.
Do we know what woke them at that 1:30 earlier time?
No, we're still waiting for some clarification in that, but we believe that the parents are due to speak later today, so we may have an update then.
And the search, has it turned up any clues at all?
No, and that's what has police quite concerned, and they are quite worried that if it is their second theory that is correct, that someone has taken this girl, they're worried that she may not even be in this region anymore, and they worry that that could have sinister consequences.
This was a blended family, as I understand it, James. Have they been speaking to Cleo's father, who wasn't on the trip?
I believe he spoke with police in Mandurah, but that was, I believe, a routine sort of thing, and there wasn't any suggestion that he was involved.
And is where he lives considerable distance from where this camping trip was taking place?
That's right. It's down probably... It's near to Perth, which is the capital city of Western Australia. It's about an 11-hour drive from where we are now.
Thanks for the update, James. That's James Carmody, who's near the Blowholes campsite in McLeod, where that little girl, Cleo Smith, 4 years old, is missing. As he said, two theories there, that she may have been abducted or could have wandered off. Bad weather hampering the search, but they're back out there again now. It is 5:45. I'm Lisa Owen, and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. He muriaki ina pita pita kōrero after the news at 6. An unwelcome visitor, COVID, makes its way to Waiheke. COVID-19 is on the doorstep of your houses. Do not let it enter. That stark message to Māori from Minister Peeni Henare as he again encouraged tangata whenua to get vaccinated. But the Minister also gave some DHBs and GPs a serve for failing to deliver for Māori in the vaccination rollout. He says the money's been slow to filter down to Māori providers in some areas, and there's a lack of strong leadership shown by some DHBs. Ko taku manuheria nai ko Peeni Henare, who's the Associate Health and Whānau Ora Minister. Tēnā koe e te minita.
Tēnā koe, kia ora tātou.
So tell me, which DHBs have not done right by Māori in the vaccine rollout?
Oh, look, there's been challenges across a number.
So which ones?
I gave an example today in the 1pm stand-up about some of the challenges that were presented in Taranaki in my time there. But as I said, the purpose of going to see them for myself was so that we could push through those barriers and get on with the collective goal, and I'm proud to say that in Taranaki that's happened. But you will have already known about the challenge in Te Tairāwhiti region, about the community-funded kaupapa that's being run over the weekend, and that's another frustration there. But I will also say, in their defence, that there's also some innovative stuff that they're doing, but our frustrations are clear.
So just those two, Taranaki and Tairāwhiti, or are there others?
There are others where the numbers are lagging, and we've identified a couple of things. For those who'll no doubt check my diary when it's proactively released, will see that I went to Taranaki, the West Coast, Christchurch, the lakes in Rotorua, and Tai Rāwhiti. Sadly, I couldn't get to Tauranga because of what was the recent case in Katikati, and I couldn't get to Palmerston North, but I have been to visit a number of those DHBs.
So if you had managed to complete that list, is that the list of people, of DHBs and leadership that aren't doing the best they can for Māori right now?
Sorry, I missed one, which was Tai Tokerau as well. So what we're quite clear, and it was mentioned today, that we're in the space where we've got to be able to target now where those numbers are lagging. And we looked across the data, and those DHBs were lagging.
So that's a long list. That's like, quick count, 6 or 7? 7, I think it is. So are they all failing to do their best for Māori in the vaccination rollout?
I think in some instances they are trying to do their best. Things are difficult. Either it's a lack of Māori health providers to be able to do that mahi, or it's a lack of leadership in the health space there. So there are a number of those challenges, and we've already just discussed some of them. But it is quite clear, and the data shows it, that our Māori numbers there are lagging, which is why I was sent there. And it was to be able to not just sit with the DHB, but also to sit with the with the Māori health providers and the iwi to discuss what some of those barriers are.
So have you told them they need to do better, those DHBs?
I met with all of them and was quite upfront about the challenges that the Māori health providers told me, and then said, yes, we need to do better, and how can we do that?
Okay, so what about you? Can you tell me one thing that you could have done better in this rollout for Māori?
Oh, look, I'll continue to push for Māori kaupapa, for more resources. We know the underfunding in the Māori health sector has been a problem for many decades now, and so I'll continue to push for more resources to make sure that they get the infrastructure. But that's just only one of the commitments I can make to our people, and have been since the start of the vaccine rollout.
My question is, what is the thing that you could have done better? So can you identify something that you look back on in this rollout where you think you have failed to do the best by Māori? Because you've identified a whole lot of problems with the DHBs, but I'm wondering about your actions.
Oh, if there's anything, it would be to have had a closer eye on the DHBs from the start. And that's why we find ourselves where we are.
So it's the DHB's fault?
Well, when we rolled out the first tranche of money directly from the Ministry of Health, there were no complaints then. As we looked towards more support, and it was agreed through the DHBs, it went there, and then there was the challenges that we're talking about now.
So, Minister, you're in Wellington at the moment, right? And you've travelled around some of these DHBs, but should you be basing yourself up here in Tamaki Makaurau?
It is my own electorate, and I've been clear. I've been in every lockdown except this Delta one, and I'm proud of the work that I've been able to do with my presence here in Wellington. I am acutely aware of the challenges in Tāmaki Makaurau. I meet with my own family as well as stakeholders there on a daily basis to continue to see how I can support them. But the purpose for me of coming down here and locking down here in Wellington is to continue to push the kaupapa for Māori, and in particular for my whānau in Tāmaki Makaurau, so I make no apologies for it.
Okay, the government is talking about vaccination targets, right, that there's going to be an announcement on Friday, and I'm not asking you to give me that announcement, but what I do want to know is, will you require Māori to reach the exact same targets as other population groups in order to relax some of the restrictions? So, for example, if you set it at 90%, is that 90% for every subgroup, including Māori?
Well, that's the work that the Prime Minister talked about and alluded to today, and I can tell you Cabinet haven't agreed on any final number there, but like I said, we're going to continue to drive up Māori vaccination rates, and that's the challenge that's in front of me.
Minister, I'm not asking you for the number, I'm just asking you regarding the principle. Will you only support a target that requires Māori to reach the exact same number as any other part of the population?
I will continue to support driving up Māori vaccination rates. Look, if we look across some of the advice that I've heard over the past 4 days from Māori circles, one group's asking for 100%, another 95%, others lower. So we've got to make sure that whatever we do, we can force through the DHBs and our Māori house providers the highest number of Māori vaccinations that we can.
Will Māori vaccination rates get to 90% double vaccinated?
I'm hopeful that they will.
And when do you think that would happen, based on the fact that at the moment only 44% of Māori nationwide are double vaccinated? So when's the projection for 90%?
Well, if we look towards the DHBs, for example, the Maori vaccination rates in Tāmaki Makaurau are strong. And based on that, we'd see that Tāmaki Makaurau Maori population is likely to hit there before some of the others. And that's the challenge that I have, is to continue to drive up the others.
Yeah, but the point is, the Prime Minister's been very clear about the fact that it needs to be across the board, right? So you can't just cherry pick Tāmaki Makaurau and say it's looking good. Here's a brief sample. In the 20 to 34-year-old group, double vaccinated, counties Manukau, 22%, Waikato, 21%, Tairawhiti, 20%, Taranaki, 16%. That is a mile away from 90%, Minister. So how are we going to get there, and when will it happen by for Māori?
Well, I'm not Nostradamus, and I'm not going to predict a date on when we'll get there. What we know is, as schools will come back online, I've been clear in meeting with Māori health providers to say, how do we wrap around our schools to vaccinate our young population? There are a number of campaigns that are already happening right now that will continue to target our younger populations. And that's what we can do to bring those numbers up. And I acknowledge that while I use Tāmaki Makaurau as an example, what we're trying to do is do it right across the country. But that means that Tāmaki and some places will get there before others.
While we've been talking, a listener has texted us. John is his name. He says 730,000 Māori are enrolled with GPs. That is the number that's on the Ministry of Health website. John wants to know why you haven't worked more closely with GPs to target Māori, given high enrolments with GPs.
As I went around to meet with Māori providers and DHBs, I met with GPs and PHOs and pharmacies. And there are already lots of good pieces of work being done. Like, for example, in Te Tai Toketo, PHOs are working closely with the Māori health providers to continue to support to drive up the Māori vaccination rates. The inconsistencies, however, are still in that sector as well. I met with one PHO who made it clear that they weren't going to be investing more into the vaccination program, but were more focused on BAU. And that's the challenge, as I've said, that I have, and I made that clear at the 1 p.m. to ask more of them to have a look to see whether or not they can continue to support to grow the Māori vaccination numbers.
Minister, when you unveil this new system on Friday, can you give a guarantee that it's going to be approved by or agreed to by the group of Māori groups that put out the press release yesterday saying that they didn't care for the traffic light system and thought it would disadvantage Māori? That's a pretty strong alliance of Māori organisations. Are you going to get the thumbs up from them before you announce anything on Friday?
Well, I disagree with that particular piece of correspondence, and I'll tell you why. Because there are a large number on those calls who have already messaged me to say they are in support of continuing to look towards how we might transfer into a system that will continue to support vaccination rates while also looking towards more liberties. It came clear to me in the meetings over the weekend from some of those named in that piece of communication that actually the whānau and Tāmaki Makaurau were quite clear they did not want to go back to it in level 4. But others outside of there were trying to push it there. And so there isn't a general consensus here. And I'm sure what will be announced on Friday will continue to get support.
Really appreciate your time, Minister. That is Peeni Henare. Health officials are thinking smaller and more nimble as they try to reach the 500,000 people who haven't had a first dose of the vaccine. First it was the ShopBro buses, now vaccine campers are on the road. More than 40 Vaxi vans will be travelling over the Motu in the next few weeks, aiming to reach isolated rural areas. One of the first stops was Onewhero in Waikato, and our reporter Louise Tanuth and camera operator Marika Habazi went to check it out.
Buckle up. This is the latest vaccine clinic on wheels, the Vaxi van. Super Saturday was a big shot in the arm for the vaccine rollout, but there's still more work to do. Now healthcare providers are on their way to find those still without a first dose. Here in Onewhero in North Waikato, the latest vaccination data shows 78.1% of people have had their first dose and 49.6% are fully vaccinated. But more than 20% of people are unvaccinated. Site lead Rosalie Ellis hopes these vans will help bring that down.
We're able to take the vaccine to them. Yeah, because there's quite a few people out there that just don't want to come into town because of COVID. They just don't want to be around it. So why not give them the opportunity to take it to them?
In some cases, they'll even do door-to-door service.
The other day I was talking to someone and she said, oh, Mum doesn't want to come out, and I said, well, give me a call later and we'll get someone to come to her. Yeah. So there are those people out there that just don't want to come out of their houses.
Today, Māori health provider Huakina Trust is doing drive-through vaccinations, using the van and a bus to assemble vaccines and transport gear. Options are limited for locals to get vaccinated. They'd usually need to travel to another town. For Amy, who's been hesitant to get the vaccine up until now, this is much easier.
And I'm just going to give you your card.
Yeah, I've got 2 young boys, very close in age, and yeah, they're still babies, so for me to be able to drop them off at daycare and swing in on my way back. I just made an appointment at my doctor on the way home actually, and then seeing this on my way here was 1,000 times easier than to have to drive somewhere.
Craig Dunlop's also thrilled with the process.
I just live at Pukekawa, so went into Poki and there's quite a few people in there, so nice and easy out here. Good, yeah. Another job ticked off the list.
While he's been due for his second dose, Super Saturday wasn't for him.
The only reason I wouldn't go to Super Saturday, too long a wait.
And driving as well.
Yeah, nice out here and drive straight in and done and be off in a minute, hopefully.
Yeah, absolutely.
Go and do some work.
Others aren't so fussed, but still getting it done.
You've got to do something with your time, don't you?
Yeah, and so did you know about today or did you just see it?
Facebook message.
So now fully immunised?
Yeah, apparently.
For Mike Durand, who's squeezing his jab in with work, not having to drive far is a bonus.
I just work 2 minutes down the road, so it all works. And I was due to get my second one, so yeah, my worker is coming up shortly as well, so yeah, it's quite handy.
He's hoping to get others on board for their first dose.
I'm trying to talk some members of the family into getting their first dose at the moment. We're having that discussion, so yeah.
That's something Waikato District Councillor Jackie Church says is crucial in communities in North Waikato who are often overlooked.
That's at the southern end of the counties of Manukau DHB area, so they're not part of Auckland, but we're not in the Waikato DHB area because we're too far north. So we've fallen into quite a bit of a black hole in terms of some of the services and the crossovers of territorial authorities.
And spreading the message about vaccines needs a different approach, particularly for rural communities.
And if you were listening to that on radio, we'll put that piece from Marika and Louise on our Facebook page and you can check it out. 94 new COVID cases in the community today, 87 of those in Auckland, 1 in Waiheke. We cross to the island live.
RNZ News at 6. Good evening, I'm Sarah Bradley. New Zealand has recorded its highest ever number of daily cases in the pandemic, 94 people with the virus in the community. And the Prime Minister is urging people under the age of 39 to get vaccinated. Jacinda Ardern says the highest number of cases today are the least vaccinated cohort, 12 to 39 years. She says, sadly, young people are not invincible, with 12 of the 38 people with COVID-19 currently in hospital under the age of 39. Ms Ardern wants all Aucklanders to get vaccinated, with just over 158,000 still to have a first dose. She also urges people to get their second dose as soon as possible, 3 weeks after the first. A Whangarei emergency doctor is sounding the alarm about the risk unvaccinated New Zealanders pose to the health system. Roughly 15% of the eligible population has yet to receive one dose of the Pfizer vaccine. Dr. Gary Payinda says many hospitals are already struggling to meet demand, and he fears they will be overwhelmed with Delta patients in the coming months.
600,000 unvaccinated adults. That is like dry tinder just waiting for a match. And what I and other emergency doctors and healthcare workers of all kinds worry about is a huge surplus of demand as and when COVID sweeps through.
Gary Payinda says vaccination rates need to rise urgently to prevent a potential collapse of some hospital services. 84 COVID cases are currently being allowed to isolate at home in Auckland. They are spread over 55 households. The Director General of Health says it's an interim measure before finalising the move, which will involve primary healthcare providers. Ashley Bloomfield says criteria for isolating at home include both a public health and clinical risk assessment and if a person can isolate safely away from others in the household. The Prime Minister and the Associate Minister of Health have avoided questions about whether the government will delay relaxing COVID restrictions until Māori vaccination rates are in step with the general population. The government will announce on Friday a new system for the future management of the virus, which will include specific vaccine coverage goals and how that will impact alert levels. Jacinda Ardern acknowledged disparities in the vaccination rollout, but would not go into details about the plan.
Yes, we've been thinking about that and the work that we're doing, which we'll be sharing a bit more detail around on Friday. But what I would say is that the work that's going on right now with our Māori providers and that we need to make sure that we are providing all the resource required is critical.
Only 45% of Māori are fully vaccinated compared to 67% of the general population. Waiheke Island residents are waiting to find out if there are any locations of interest linked to a case of COVID-19 confirmed on the island today. The local board chairperson, Kath Handley, says health authorities informed this afternoon of the positive case, the first on the island during the Delta outbreak. She says the community is shocked but not surprised given its proximity to Auckland.
Until we know whether this is a community transmission case for Waiheke and or what are their locations of interest on Waiheke, we won't know really the level of risk that is carried. But meanwhile, I have been going to the community to suggest that now is the time to get vaccinated.
Kath Handley says anyone with symptoms is advised to get tested. The latest data, as of last week, showed vaccination rates within Waiheke Island's most populated eastern suburbs were at 82.9% for the first dose and 62.2% for the second. The Green Party says bipartisan support to unlock new houses in major cities will overshadow the concerns of those only worried about their own backyard. Labour and National have teamed up to create new rules that will allow up to three-storey buildings on existing sites without a resource consent. Green Party co-leader James Shaw says the political consensus should protect the housing supply boost in the face of NIMBYs, known as people who protest not in my backyard.
It's important, I think, to know that because of the pressures of NIMBYism and so on, to have that bipartisan support is actually really good, because it does mean that both this government and any future national government that ever kind of eventually gets around to getting back into government, that they've got kind of cover there.
The legislation will have its first reading next week and will become law by mid-December. And US rapper Kanye West has legally changed his name to Ye following a judge's approval. He celebrated the name change with a post on social media showing a new unconventional hairdo with an abstract design shaved into the back of his head. The 44-year-old entertainer released his 8th studio album in 2018 titled Ye, and it's been his Twitter handle for some time. To sport, and the season is over for the Auckland, North Harbour and Counties Manukau provincial rugby sides. The three teams were forced to withdraw from the championship earlier this month because of COVID restrictions in the region, but had been hoping to play a Super City competition amongst themselves. However, New Zealand Rugby says the continuation of restrictions in Auckland means that won't now be possible. The Black Caps need to make the most of the last chance to fine-tune their game ahead of their opening match at the T20 World Cup. After a narrow loss to Australia this morning, New Zealand's third and final warm-up game is against England in Abu Dhabi tomorrow night. Black Caps batting coach Luke Ronke says they want to get as much as possible from the match ahead of their tournament opener against Pakistan in a week's time.
It is trying to just fine-tune those little bits and pieces you can't perfect, but just get better and better as much as you possibly can. So every team's doing that, and every team's sort of looking to grow in the steps towards the World Cup. So for us, it's no different, and the guys are doing the same thing.
The 110-test Wallabies veteran Sekope Kepu is the latest player to sign with Moana Pacifica for next year's Super Rugby Pacific competition. And the Wellington Phoenix have signed experienced midfielders Chloe Knott and Grace Jail, along with 5 players from the Future Ferns program for their inaugural A-League women's squad. And that's the news.
Tomorrow
Tonight on Nights, Tony Stamp samples a collection of B-sides from Canadian singer-songwriter Andy Shelf, along with the latest from Melbourne punks Amel and the Sniffers. Meanwhile, Patrick Phelps from Minerals West Coast reckons opponents of mining are overstating the job opportunities in alternative sectors because he reckons pouring coffee and folding sheets for tourists ain't cutting it. It's all on Nights of me, Brian Crump, after the news at 7 on RNZ National.
We're funded through New Zealand On Air, and we're back with Lisa Owen and Checkpoint in a minute. But first, the short forecast from Met Service to midnight tomorrow. Northland, Auckland and Coromandel mainly fine. Isolated afternoon showers for Coromandel tomorrow night. Waikato to Kapiti, including the central high country. Cloudy periods, isolated showers at times. For the Bay of Plenty, Gisborne, Hawke's Bay, Wairarapa and Wellington, also Nelson and Marlborough. Fine today, cloud and isolated showers spreading north from tonight, showers clearing from southern regions tomorrow morning. Bulla to Fiordland, cloudy with isolated showers, however rain in the south spreading north today, clearing to fine in Fiordland by this evening. Rain clearing about southern Westland and rain easing to showers farther north overnight. For Canterbury, rain spreading north, easing to isolated showers tonight, but remaining rather cloudy. Otago and Southland, partly cloudy with a few showers, clearing inland this evening and becoming fine there. Showers clearing elsewhere Wednesday afternoon. And for the Chatham Islands, cloudy with a few showers. You're listening to RNZ National. It's 8.5 past 6. We'll have news headlines at past.
Kia ora rā, e ho no mai hoki mai. This is Checkpoint, ko Lisa Owen tēnei. There's a confirmed case of COVID on Waiheke Island in the Hauraki Gulf, the first since the pandemic began. Earlier this month, a health order was issued, basically cutting the island off from Auckland, with only residents and those with essential travel reasons able to travel to Waiheke. Great Barrier is included in the order too, as both have limited access to medical care. To date, 86% of Waiheke's population have had one dose of the vaccine, while 70% are double-dosed. Joining me now is Waiheke Local Board Chair, Kath Handley. Kia ora, Kath. What do you know about the case?
Kia ora, Lisa. Well, we're learning more as we go. So I was aware from rumours this morning that there was someone here. That's now been confirmed through our medical services just in the last little while. It had been confirmed through health that there was a case, but we've got more details just recently, and I must admit it upsets people here greatly. It probably raises more questions than it answers.
In what way, Kath? More questions?
Sure. So this person that wasn't tested here, I thought they had been. They were tested somewhere else and then travelled to Waiheke not on a passenger ferry, which would be a great relief to everybody who's been on the passenger ferries, but via our vehicular ferry, Sea-Link, on Sunday. And they stayed in their vehicle there, so that was no risk to anybody else by the looks, or low risk, and then went to a residence here and had no contact with anyone. So there aren't any locations of interest on Waiheke Island for us to be concerned about. But I guess that raises a whole lot of questions about if the person had gone with COVID symptoms and got tested, why they travelled after they got the test and why they came here and why they're now allowed to self-isolate here.
Is that the situation, Kath? Have you been told they're going to be allowed to remain on the island?
Well, that is what the medical services have advised, which must be signed off for the Ministry of Health, that this person is self-isolating at a residence on Waiheke Island.
Do you know?
My phone is running hot, I've got to tell you, from locals who are so upset by this because they're not non-residents aren't meant to be coming here.
Well, that's my next question, Kath. Do you know that this person is not a resident of Waiheke?
No, we don't, but we are aware that the person works on the North Shore. So I don't know who they are with here, whether it's their own residents, whether they're normally here or not. But travelling regardless after having flu-like symptoms and getting a COVID test is just outrageous.
Could they have tested as part of surveillance testing, though, Kath? Potentially no symptoms at all and needed a test for work reasons?
As I understand it, that isn't the case. But, I'm hoping that the Ministry of Health will advise that. But as I understand it, because there are people in Auckland who know some detail, who are making contact, that I believe this person may have had symptoms like last Thursday.
Okay, so have you been given any explanation as to why they are being allowed to remain in self-isolation when they're COVID positive?
No information at this stage, but there are questions that need to be answered for our community, like how many people are in this setting, this particular house. How is this being monitored and who's doing that? And, have the police been advised? Are they asked to play a role? Who's supervising this and ensuring that this person who's already been travelled from Auckland to Waiheke, what guarantees do we have that this person will not just travel or walk around in the community or go out and do some shopping for themselves? So it's those sorts of things, questions. I'm not going to preempt those. They might all be covered off by the Ministry of Health already.
But obviously now the community knows this person's present and they are still devoid of this information. That's not an ideal situation, is it, Kath?
No, it's not. And I do get that it's hard because the ministry is tracing more and more people all of the time. But we did hear from Dr. Bloomfield today that this, he has been talking about the self-isolating in homes, and today he confirmed that was happening. I suspect it's this person he was talking about. But really, the situation is untenable in a community unless the community is given assurances right up front about how that person will be monitored, contained, and we need to be sympathetic with the person. They might be a local. We might need to look out for them. So I don't want to prejudge all of that. But the community needs to be much better advised than getting this advice through our medical services kind of at the end of the day.
So I'm wondering, Kath, how is the health order going? So this is the order, which means you should only be on the island if you're a resident or an essential worker, right? So what's your observations on how well that is working? Because, you're an island, lots of people have boats.
Well, I heard Hone Harawira talking about Northland, and I was nodding about what he said this morning, which is that the border is porous, but for us it's not a flood. So for that, the local board and the residents are very grateful, the majority of them, that we know because the day trippers have been deterred. Secondly, there is a control across the whole region for second homeowners. Nobody's allowed to stay anywhere else overnight, even if it's in a tent. So that's not Waiheke specific. But what we did ask for was some border controls, and they're sporadic. And I know that the police aren't resourced well, so what they do is spot check. And they do spot check, but we know all around Waiheke from people whose neighbours shifted back into the house next door, came over to do things. And we see people, we do know when people aren't locals. So we recognise that there's, quite a few people, but not a flood, who've come to Waiheke.
Really appreciate your time this evening. That's Kath Handley, who's the Waikato local board, the Waiheke local board chair. They've got a case on the island. It's the first since the pandemic started, and as Kath said, there are plenty of questions to be answered. Christmas is just around the corner, but with Tamaki Makaurau still stuck in level 3, many are wondering if they should be making any plans at all. The Prime Minister says Aucklanders shouldn't be cancelling plans to leave town for the festive season, and told media this morning she believes the city will be out of level 3 by Christmas. Despite that, some Aucklanders are preparing for a summer spent in their backyard. Anei te kai reporter, Katie Doyle.
Trolleys full of presents and food. That one stressed family member who's left everything till the last minute.
But what happens if you live in Auckland? Will we be able to have the normal Kiwi Christmas this year?
Not sure what's happening yet, so no. Probably be a picnic though, won't it?
Oh, not this year, because I have a whole bunch of family that live overseas and I'm the only one in New Zealand, so it looks like a Zoom Christmas for me.
With our Prime Minister Jacinta to drop the levels down, all I want for Christmas is to have a normal Christmas, a normal Kiwi Christmas. But for this year, the answer to your question, possibly no, not a normal Christmas, meaning being behind my four walls due to this lockdown, but can't complain if it's for safety.
It's not even in my calendar yet.
So will COVID be the Grinch that stole Christmas in Auckland?
Are we going to be out of this by Christmas?
Oh, I believe so, yes.
Would your advice to people in Auckland be don't book flights, don't book Airbnbs, don't plan to see the family outside of Auckland this side of Christmas?
No, that wouldn't necessarily be my advice.
The Prime Minister with that small bit of hope on breakfast shows this morning. So what do Aucklanders think? Will they be able to head to family outside of Christmas for the holidays?
Do you think that you'll be able to leave the Auckland border at any point?
Oh, I'm not fussed. If I'm allowed to go to Waiheke, that'd be enough for me.
I want to go home / to Australia, but no.
That doesn't look like it. Not this. Maybe in late January.
The winterless north is a hot spot for Aucklanders in summer. Wayne Johnston manages a campground up there, Bland Bay, which draws plenty of big city dwellers every year.
People are still booking from Auckland. The majority of our campers here during the summer period are from Auckland, and some of them are second, third generation that have camped here.
He's hopeful Aucklanders will be able to cross the border. Camping revenue depends on it. But to get into Bland Bay campsite, everyone will likely need to be double vaxxed.
We're just looking at the legalities of us enforcing people that come in camping to be vaccinated twice, 12 years and over, because the last thing we want is to be shut down or to be a spreader of COVID up here in the north.
The Prime Minister says how to deal with the border around Auckland will be looked at by officials.
When it comes to the issue of the border, we're also doing additional work on how we can manage the competing interests of the rest of New Zealand where they predominantly do not have COVID cases, ensure their safety, but also acknowledge that Aucklanders will need to be able to move around.
With 2 months till the big day, many Aucklanders will be hoping they can leave the city and lockdown behind.
It is 19 minutes past 6 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Life in Australia is slowly getting back to normal, with more states releasing plans to open up and let people back in. With high vaccination rates, a national plan and clear targets, states are beginning to lift more restrictions and have announced plans to let vaccinated expats and visitors back in. World Watch's Peeni Henare reports.
Victoria's roadmap remains on track. Premier Daniel Andrews saying the state is likely to pass 90% of first dose vaccinations today.
So we are well placed to reach our target of 70% double dose and to open up as of 11:59 p.m. Thursday evening, which is a great credit to the work of so many Victorians, now more than 5 million that have had at least one dose.
Come Friday, lockdown will be lifted. Welcome relief to those in Melbourne who've spent 262 days, that's nearly 9 months, in some form of lockdown since March last year. But case numbers are still high, with more than 1,700 infections today and 11 deaths. Across the border in New South Wales, double vaccinated people are already enjoying new freedoms after the 80% double dose vaccination target was achieved a week earlier than expected. But with 273 new cases and 4 deaths in the state, talk is now turning to booster jabs for health workers. Chief Health Officer Dr Kerry Chant says they're waiting on advice.
In terms of the booster recommendations, ATAGI is currently considering the recommendations. You've probably seen a variety of recommendations internationally, and I understand that they will be releasing that very, very shortly. And obviously, as soon as that advice is released, we as a system with GPs, pharmacies, our state clinics will rapidly implement that.
Anna Davidson is the director of the Port Stephens GP Super Clinic in North Sydney.
Boosters are already being given overseas. We know that waning is real. That's been established. We have all our healthcare workers who essentially have been working for 18 months, pretty much flat out. People are exhausted and they're worried about their immunity waning and what might happen if they get a breakthrough infection.
Victorian Premier Daniel Andrews is also eager to hear from the advisory group.
What we want, it's not a sense of criticism, it's just what we would really appreciate, I think, is some clarity as soon as we can, and I'm sure the Commonwealth's working towards that.
In Queensland, the exit plan is locked in. The border is set to open to fully vaccinated travellers by the 17th of December, if not sooner. Some businesses are worried they'll still struggle, and Premier Anastasia Palaszczuk says it's up to individual businesses to check on the vaccination status of their customers. Andrew Watt manages a bed and breakfast in the Whitsundays.
I don't really know. I'm going to have to look into that a little bit more, but probably will be that way with the vaccination, but I'm not sure yet which way we're going to go.
The Premier says regional Queensland needs to pick up the pace with vaccinations as it's falling behind the metropolitan areas.
My job and my team is to increase the vaccination rates right across Queensland. As we know, in Brisbane, we're probably around 80% first dose already in the Brisbane area. But as soon as you get out to regional Queensland, Mackay, Rockhampton, Mount Isa, some of the smaller communities, we are seeing our vaccination rates anywhere between 60 and 70%. So we've got a big job ahead of us over the next 2 to 3 weeks.
So far, the state has managed to keep a large outbreak and lockdowns at bay with strict border controls.
Ngāti Whātua is defending the management of the border between Te Tai Tokerau and Tamaki Makaurau. Northam will drop down to alert level 2 at midnight following a COVID scare in which a woman who later tested positive crossed the border using fake documents. That's raised concerns that poor controls could see more cases sneak through. But those on the front lines say the strict setup is running as it should. Sam Ollie was there today.
About 45 people are spread across the shifts each day at Te Hana checkpoint on State Highway 1, just north of Warkworth. It's a team made up of mana whenua, police, the New Zealand Defence Force and traffic controllers. Te Runanga o Ngāti Whātua Chief Operations Officer Anthony Thompson has spent some days there himself. This is his response to the criticism.
You have to remember that Ngāti Whātua have been on the checkpoints at Te Hana for the last 7 weeks. And in those 7 weeks, the goalposts have changed almost daily. And that's in order to accommodate how the Crown, how our public, and how the government are moving and motivating things to happen.
He also says the checkpoints are in the right places.
If you want to set up checkpoints elsewhere in the north, you're going to have the complexity of by roads and side roads. For example, if you wanted to set up a checkpoint in, say, Waipu or Urititi, which has been a focal point lately, there's at least another 15 to 16 roads and side roads around the area that could get you from, let's say, the Brenduans through other alternative routes to Whangarei.
On the asphalt today, alongside the portaloos, tents, caravans and road cones, were Ngāti Whātua Kaitiaki.
I've been here for about 3 weeks, 4 weeks now, and I've learned more than in school.
18-year-old Dallas Martin is one of the youngest on the team. He makes sure people scan in when they arrive.
People say that this is a pretty easy job. It's not. Standing in the sun all day is exhausting.
Kiri Pirika has been coming back week after week since the checkpoint was first set up. He just wants to keep Delta out of the north.
I think we did well for now, for this time, even though we had a bit of a couple of people that got through. We just love doing it.
Peter Tūmata oversees the Te Runanga o Ngāti Whātua team at the site. He says there are ways mana whenua reduce tension with travellers that others in uniform cannot.
For example, we had a whāia come to the line. Her whānau up north was struggling with kai and she felt the need to attend to that. Our kaitiaki got her information. We sorted out health services on that side to engage the whānau there and provide them with kai.
Sometimes the red and blue lights go on, but mostly travellers are compliant. The latest police data shows 56 of 1,766 vehicles at the northern checkpoints were turned away on Sunday.
A grand gesture from a small community. Residents in Tappahannock in Virginia banded together to show their appreciation for a local fast food worker who walks to work every day. CNN's Brendan King reports.
You go through the drive-thru at any given time and she's just as happy as can be.
Since 1987, customers at the Burger King in Tappahannock can expect employee Lisa Bateman to greet them with a hello and a smile.
She knows my order. As soon as she hears my voice, she's like, "You want the usual?" I'm like, "Yeah."
But no matter the weather, rain, snow, cold or heat, the 60-year-old walks nearly a mile to work.
You know, I see her walking all the time and I figured it'd be nice to do something like this for somebody in our community.
What started as a Facebook post turned into a community-wide fundraiser to buy her a new car.
We raised a little over $4,200 for her.
So Monday afternoon, they waited until Lisa ended her shift.
Hi, I'm good. How are you? Hi, how are you doing? Good. So we, as the town of Tappahannock, wanted to show you a little bit of appreciation for your hard work, for always
her reaction,
giving us positive energy.
Absolutely priceless.
Oh my God!
They even gifted her some cash left over from the GoFundMe.
You deserve it.
Oh my God. I really enjoy what I do. You know, when I make them happy, you know I'm happy.
Lisa says she's walked down Tappahannock Boulevard to work for the last 7 years.
I just look at it this way. Just like I told my manager, as long as my little leg's going to take me, I'm going to do it. I'm going to work.
A grand gesture in a small town, proving these neighbors look out for one another.
When I come to work tomorrow, I might be to stop shaking by then. Oh my God, I just don't know what to say, but thank you.
And a lot of feedback in from you about COVID and related issues. Paul says positive role modelling is the only way to get the vaccination rate up. We've designed cool bumper stickers and badges to give hesitant individuals the confidence to follow suit when they see that their friends have already had their pinprick. And this one in says, I had my second shot in July and I'm still waiting 3 months later for the anti-vax and those hesitant, and I'm getting tired and angry with the knowledge that Christmas with family is starting to look more and more unlikely. Enough of the carrot, they say. It is time for the stick. Time to bring out public and private vaccine mandates and bugger personal rights. The population is behind such a move. Just do it. Gary reckons Auckland must go to level 4 to reduce the spread and make people realise the abuse of level 3 steps has consequences, says Gary. On the Oh, actually, no. That's about all we've got time for. Sorry, can't get to the rest of them. The late news team will keep you updated throughout the night. Ko te kaupapa tuatahi a pōpō. And tomorrow from 5 a.m, as our bedraggled Auckland locks grow upward and outward, First Up speaks to hairdressers calling for financial support.
Headlines at 6:30. Associate Minister of Māori Health, Peeni Henare, has told multiple district health boards they need to do better to get tangata whenua vaccinated against COVID-19.